Hello to all dear students. So today we will be discussing about pharmacokinetic drug interaction. So first of all, drug interactions have been recognized over 100 years. Today, with the increasing availability of complex therapeutic agent and the widespread polypharmacy, the potential for drug interaction is enormous and they have become an increasingly important cause of adverse drug reactions, that is ADRs. Some unintentional drug interaction produce adverse reaction in the patients, whereas some drug interactions may be intentional to provide an improved therapeutic responses or to decrease the adverse drug effects. Drug interaction may include drug-drug interaction, food-drug interaction, even chemical drug interaction. So chemicals like alcohol or tobacco chewing, even it may lead to drug interaction. Types of drug interaction. So they are, first of all, pharmacokinetic drug interaction. Drug interaction may cause an alteration in the pharmacokinetics of the drug due to an interaction in drug absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion. Drug interaction can also be pharmacodynamic interaction at the receptor site, in which the competing drug potentiates or antagonizes the action of the first drug. And lastly, the pharmaceutical drug interaction, which can occur when physical or chemical incompatibilities arises during a pharmaceutical compounding. Pharmaceutical interactions such as drug excipient interaction are also considered during the development and manufacture of new and generic drug products. Next, the risk of drug interaction increases with multiple drug therapy, multiple prescribers, poor patient compliance and patient risk factors such as predisposing illness like diabetes, hypertension, etc. or advancing age. So we can say multiple drug therapy has become routine in most acute and chronic settings. Elderly patients and patients with various predisposing illness tend to be a population using multiple drug therapy. A recent survey found an average of 8 to 12 drugs per patient used in a group of hospital patients. Apart from this, another risk is regarding the herbal remedies. An important source of drug interaction is the combination of herbal remedies, sometimes referred to as nutraceuticals or dietary supplements, with the drug therapy that can lead to drug-herbal interactions. Although many herbal products are safe when taken alone, but many drug-herbal interactions have also been reported. A very good example is this St. John's wort. This St. John's wort, it is an herbal extract used for the treatment of depression and can cause serious interaction as a result of its enzyme-inducing effect. So this particular natural compound, it is an inducer of cytochrome P450. Okay, and we know this cytochrome P450 is involved in the metabolism of many drugs. So we can say St. John's wort reduces the plasma drug concentration of indinavir, a protease inhibitor used to treat HIV infections and AIDS. So such kind of drug-herbal interaction may also take place. So we can say screening for drug interaction is generally performed whenever multiple drug products are dispensed to the patient. However, the pharmacist should ask the patient when dispensing any medication whether the patient is taking any over-the-counter drug or any herbal supplements or any contraceptive drugs. Some patients do not realize that these products may interact with their drug therapy. The pharmacist need to determine the clinical significance of the interaction and whether there is an alternate drug or alternate dosage regimen design that will prevent the drug interaction. The clinical significance of a potential drug interaction should be documented in the literature, and the likelihood of a drug interaction may be classified as established drug interaction, second, probable drug interaction, third one, possible drug interaction, or unlikely drug interaction as such. Next, our main topic, that is pharmacokinetic interaction. Pharmacokinetic interactions are those that affect the process by which drugs are absorbed, distributed, metabolized, or excreted. Due to marked inter-individual variability in these processes, these interactions may be expected, but their extent cannot be easily predicted. Such interactions may result in a change in the drug concentration at the site of action with subsequent toxicity or decreased efficacy. Obviously, if large amount of drug is available at the target site, it may lead to toxicity, and if less amount of drug is available at the target site, it may lead to decreased efficacy. So we'll learn this pharmacokinetic drug interaction as ADME. That is, first of all we'll discuss about absorption, then distribution, then metabolism, and lastly elimination. So we'll start our discussion with absorption, and we know what is meant by absorption. Absorption means movement of drug from the site of administration into the systemic circulation. This thing we know. Following oral administration, drugs are absorbed through the mucous membranes of the gastrointestinal tract. A number of factors can affect the rate of absorption or the extent of absorption, that is the total amount of drug absorbed. So various factors are changes in gastrointestinal pH, absorption, chelation, and other complexing mechanisms, effects on gastrointestinal motility, induction or inhibition of transport proteins, and lastly malabsorption. So we'll start our discussion with the first factor, that is changes in gastrointestinal pH. So suppose this is our gastrointestinal tract, and we know that the stomach is acidic in nature and the intestine is alkaline in nature. So acidic drug is well absorbed when it is in acidic pH, because under acidic pH the acidic drug will be remaining non-ionized form. Similarly, alkaline drug is well absorbed when it is present in an alkaline environment. But if we give a drug such as antacids or histamine H2 antagonist or omeprazole, then what will happen? These agents are likely to reduce the acidic pH of the stomach. Now when the acidity of the pH, or you can say the pH of the stomach, is no more acidic in nature, it will affect the absorption of acidic drugs. So you can say antacids, histamine H2 antagonist, and omeprazole can significantly decrease the bioavailability of ketoconazole and itraconazole, which require gastric acidity for optimum absorption. But the absorption of fluconazole and voriconazole is not significantly altered by changes in the gastric pH. Obviously, any drug that require an acidic pH for absorption, means acidic pH means acidic drug only requires the acidic pH. So if we are making the stomach less acidic, or if you are making the pH of the intestine more acidic, it is likely to affect the absorption of the appropriate drugs. So lastly, we can say the alkalizing effects of antacid on the gastrointestinal tract are transient, and the potential for interaction may be minimized by leaving an interval of 2 to 3 hours between the antacid and the potentially interacting drugs. So by this we can inhibit such kind of drug interaction. Next, the second factor is absorption, chelation, and other complexing mechanism. Certain drugs react directly within the gastrointestinal tract to form chelates and complexes which are not absorbed. The drugs most commonly implicated in this type of interaction includes tetracycline and quinolone antibiotics that can complex with iron and antacids containing calcium, aluminium, bismuth, even magnesium. So suppose this is our GI tract, and suppose we have consumed tetracycline. This tetracycline, and along with tetracycline, suppose we are giving any antacids containing divalent or trivalent metal ions. So there is chances of interaction between tetracycline along with a divalent or trivalent metal ions, and the result of this interaction is it leads to the formation of insoluble chelates, and this insoluble chelates may fail to get absorbed. So this is a kind of interaction that occurs because of the formation of chelates or complex formation. Similarly, and another example is bisphosphonates are often co-prescribed with calcium supplements in the treatment of osteoporosis, because both are used for the treatment of osteoporosis. But the problem is, if we take these two drugs, that is bisphosphonates and calcium supplements, if we take both these drugs concomitantly, however, the bioavailability of both is significantly reduced with possibility of therapeutic failure. The problem is both bisphosphonates and calcium supplement will form complex, and therefore their absorption will be reduced. When absorption is reduced, then there will be therapeutic failure, obviously. The absorption of some drugs may be reduced if they are given with absorbents such as charcoal or kaolin or anionic exchange resins such as cholestyramine or cholestypol. So lastly, we can say most chelation and absorption interactions can be avoided if an interval of 2 to 3 hours is allowed between doses of the interacting drugs. Next, the third factor is the effects on the gastrointestinal motility. Now, since we know most of the drugs are largely absorbed in the upper part of the small intestine, and the drugs that alter the rate at which the stomach empties its content can be affect the absorption. So, drugs such as anticholinergic drugs such as tricyclic antidepressants, phenothiazines, and some antihistamines, they decreases the gut motility. They reduces the gastrointestinal motility and delay gastric emptying. So the outcome is the reduced gut motility can either increase or decrease the absorption of certain drugs. Okay, like for example, tricyclic antidepressant can increase the dicomerol absorption, probably as a result of increasing the time available for its dissolution and absorption. Okay, so when you are reducing the GI motility, there are certain drugs whose absorption is been increased. An example is dicomerol, whose absorption is increased. Similarly, an opposite action can also occur, like as you can see whatever I have written in red color. Anticholinergic agents used in the management of movement disorders have been shown to reduce the bioavailability of levodopa by as much as 50%, possibly as a result of increased metabolism in the intestinal mucosa. Okay, so either these GIT motility reducing agent, they may either increase the absorption of certain drug, and they can also reduce the absorption of certain drugs. Next, coming to the fourth factor, that is induction or inhibition of drug transport proteins. The oral bioavailability of some drugs is limited by the action of drug transporter proteins, which can eject the drugs that have diffused across the gut lining back into the gut. So an example is, suppose this is your gastrointestinal tract and this is a transporter, and this is basically a transporter for digoxin. So digoxin is been trapped by this transporter, and this transporter will put this digoxin into your GI tract, and then this drug is eliminated out of the body. But digoxin, this transporter is a P glycoprotein transporter, and digoxin is a substrate of P glycoprotein. And suppose this digoxin is given with another drug, that is verapamil. So what this verapamil will do? This verapamil it is an inhibitor of this transporter. So digoxin when given with verapamil, since verapamil has inhibited this transporter, so digoxin transportation is inhibited. So you can say the stay time of digoxin in the body will be prolonged, and it may lead to digoxin toxicity as well. Okay, so this thing also can be done by inhibiting or by inducing the transporter protein. Also we can induce drug interaction. So digoxin when it is given along with verapamil, it may result in digoxin toxicity. And why digoxin toxicity is happening? Because digoxin is unable to get eliminated out of our body. And why digoxin is unable to get eliminated out of our body? Because the transporter which is required for grabbing the digoxin from the blood circulation and dumping it into the GI tract and then eliminating out, that transporter is getting inhibited. Now why this transporter is getting inhibited? Because of the drug verapamil. This verapamil is inhibiting this transporter, because of which the stay time of digoxin in our body has been increased. So this is all about this factor number 4. Now coming to the last factor, that is malabsorption. And malabsorption means it is a condition that prevents absorption through the small intestine. Now suppose this is your gastrointestinal tract, and suppose you have consumed a drug, that is neomycin. So a drug such as neomycin, it may cause malabsorption syndrome. And following neomycin, if you are consuming digoxin, it results in reduced absorption of this digoxin. Okay, so this is an example of malabsorption. Neomycin is inducing malabsorption syndrome. Therefore, another drug such as digoxin is unable to get absorbed. Similarly, another example is these fats and free acids. Their hydrolysis requires gastric lipase and pancreatic lipase. Now, suppose we have consumed a drug known as orlistat. This orlistat is a specific long-acting inhibitor of gastric and pancreatic lipase. So this orlistat causes reduced absorption of fat-soluble drug. Okay, so this is all about the drug interaction that affects the absorption of drug. And few important points regarding this drug interaction related with the absorption are: most of the interaction that occurs within the gut results in reduced rather than increased absorption. For drugs that are given chronically on a multiple dose regimen, the rate of absorption is usually unimportant, provided the total amount of drug absorbed is not markedly altered. On the other hand, delayed absorption can be clinically significant where the drug affected has a short half-life or where it is important to achieve high plasma concentrations rapidly, as may be the case with analgesic or hypnotics. And lastly, absorption interactions can often be avoided by allowing an interval of 2 to 3 hours between administration of the interacting drugs. So this is all about the drug interaction that may occur during absorption. Next, drug distribution interaction we'll see. So following absorption, a drug undergoes distribution to various tissues, including to its site of action. So suppose this is your blood vessel, and in the blood we have got plasma protein. So many drugs will bind to this plasma protein. Now these blue stars are nothing but your drugs. The drug which is bound to the plasma protein are known as bound drug, whereas the drug which is not bonded or not attached to the plasma protein are known as free drugs. So free drugs are very much free to release out from the vascular compartment, whereas the bound drug, they are unable to leave this vascular compartment. The reason behind this is whenever a drug binds to a plasma protein, the size of the drug increases, because of which it is unable to leave the vascular compartment. Moreover, acidic drug will bind to a plasma protein, that is albumin. So acidic drug like for example warfarin, it will mainly approach to bind with albumin kind of plasma protein, whereas alpha-1 acid glycoprotein, it is a plasma protein for basic drugs such as tricyclic, antidepressant, lidocaine, propranolol, and so on and so forth. So extent of binding depends on the individual compound. No generalization for a pharmacological or chemical class can be made. Now, whenever large amount of free plasma proteins are available, the drugs will come and they will approach and they will bind with the plasma protein. But once saturation of the plasma protein takes place, the drug will be free, and this free drug can easily leave this vascular compartment. One more important thing is bound drugs are always equilibrium with the free drug. If 4 drugs are bound, then 4 drugs are free, and this free drug can easily undergo metabolism and elimination. Now, if suppose the level of free drug is less, then few bound drug will leave the plasma protein, so that always the free drug and bound drug are maintained in equilibrium. Okay, whenever the free drugs are being metabolized, the drug, they will leave the plasma protein and they will become free drug. Okay, so always bound drug is equal to free drug. Next, one more important thing is, suppose this is a plasma protein and to this a drug, that is warfarin, has been bonded. Now when warfarin is taken along with another drug, that is sulfonamide, so this sulfonamide may displace the warfarin from its binding site, and now warfarin is available in a free form. So this reaction is known as a displacement reaction. So during distribution, drug interaction may occur principally as a result of displacement from the protein binding site. A drug displacement interaction is defined as a reduction in the extent of plasma protein binding of one drug caused by the presence of another drug, resulting in the increased free or unbound fraction of the displaced drug. However, clinical pharmacokinetic studies suggest that for most drugs, once displacement from plasma protein occurs, the concentration of free drug rises temporarily but falls rapidly back to its previous steady state concentration due to metabolism and distribution. So any drug which is present in free form, you may think that it is free from, means it will likely to produce toxic reaction, but these free drugs can be easily undergo metabolism and excretion. Therefore, there is no that much problem of the displacement reaction. The time this takes will depend on the half-life of the displaced drug. The short-term rise in the free drug concentration is generally of little clinical significance, but may need to be taken into account in therapeutic drug monitoring. Yes, because therapeutic drug monitoring is mainly done for those drugs that have got very narrow therapeutic index, and very slight increase in the free drug concentration may lead to toxic effect. So as such, displacement reaction are of not that much problematic, but it may produce problem in case of a drug that have got a very narrow therapeutic range. Lastly, for example, if a patient taking phenytoin is given a drug which displaces phenytoin from its binding sites, the total, that is free plus bound, plasma phenytoin concentration will fall even though the free concentration remains the same. Okay, so this is regarding the drug displacement. Next, we'll go to the drug metabolism. So most clinically important interaction involve the effect of one drug on the metabolism of another drug. Metabolism refers to the process by which drugs and other compounds are biochemically modified to facilitate their degradation and subsequent removal from the body. So drug metabolism is a process by which a lipophilic drug is converted into hydrophilic drug, and hydrophilic drug is trapped into your kidneys and they are eliminated out of your body. The liver is the principal site of drug metabolism, although other organs such as gut, kidney, lungs, skin and even placenta are also involved in this metabolism process. Drug metabolism consists of phase 1 reactions such as oxidation, reduction and hydrolysis, as well as phase 2 reactions which principally involved conjugation of the drug with substances such as glucuronic acid and sulfuric acid. Phase 1 metabolism generally involves the cytochrome P450 mixed function oxidase system. And the liver is the major site of cytochrome P450 mediated metabolism, but the enterocyte in the small intestine epithelium are also potentially important. Now we'll talk a little bit about cytochrome P450 isoenzyme. So cytochrome means it is a cellular pigment, and being a hemoprotein capable of oxidation reaction, it came to be called as cytochrome. So cytochrome P450 is abbreviated as CYP450. So CY came from this cytochrome, and from here P, pigment P, and this is 450. Now you will be thinking about why 450 is there. So P450 denotes the absorption peak at 450 nanometer. So when you check out the graph, the absorption takes place at 450 nanometer. So the name came cytochrome P450. Next we'll discuss little about the nomenclature, as there are many different isoforms of this enzyme. A classification of nomenclature has been developed, and it comprises of a family number, a subfamily letter, and number for individual enzyme within the subfamily. Like for example, CYP2D6. CYP is the superfamily. 2 is the family number. D is the subfamily letter, and 6 is the number for individual enzyme within the subfamily. 4 main subfamilies of P450 isoenzymes thought to be responsible for most of the metabolism of commonly used drugs in humans, that is CYP1, CYP2, CYP3 and CYP4. These are the 4 main subfamilies of the P450 isoenzyme that have got activity of metabolism in human beings. Of many isoenzymes, a few, that is CYP1A2, CYP2C9, CYP2C19, CYP2D6, CYP2E1 and CYP3A4 appears to be responsible for human metabolism of most commonly used drugs. Now we will be thinking about what we are actually discussing about. Yes, where our main topic is pharmacokinetic drug interaction. So why we are discussing about the nomenclature and about the cytochrome P450 enzyme? The reason behind discussing about these enzymes are, these enzymes can be easily induced and inhibited by another drugs that may lead to drug interaction. So we'll check out about this. Suppose we have consumed a blue drug, and for this blue drug we have got the enzyme CYP. So whenever this cytochrome P enzyme interact with the blue drug, it will cause metabolism of this blue drug. Okay, this is a normal condition. Suppose along with blue drug we have consumed a pink drug, and this pink drug has inhibited the enzyme. So because of the enzyme inhibition, it will fail to cause metabolism of the blue drug. So this is known as enzyme inhibition. Enzyme inhibition means when two or more drug, like in this case when we are taking blue drug and pink drug together, pink drug is inhibiting the activity of the enzyme, because of which the metabolism of blue drug has been inhibited. Now when metabolism of blue drug is inhibited means what happened? The blue drug is available in higher amount, and it may lead to toxicity of the blue drug as such. So when two or more drugs are taken concomitantly, one drug may inhibit the activity of the enzyme which is required for metabolism of another drug. So this condition is known as enzyme inhibition. So enzyme activity has been inhibited over here. Similarly, and another example, again we have taken a blue drug for which this CYP is a substrate, and along with blue drug now we have taken a yellow drug. Now what this yellow drug is doing? This yellow drug has increased the activity of this enzyme. It has given extra power. This yellow drug has supplied extra power to this enzyme, and as a result of which the metabolism of this blue drug has been increased too much. So much the drug has been metabolized that therapeutically active concentration is also not available. So this condition is known as enzyme induction. Enzyme induction means one drug is inducing the enzyme, means it is increasing the activity of the enzyme. So that is known as enzyme induction. Both enzyme inhibition as well as enzyme induction may lead to drug interaction. Enzyme induction usually results in a decreased pharmacological effect of the affected drugs. St. John's wort is not known to be a potent inducer of CYP3A. Thus, when a patient receives cyclosporine, tacrolimus, HIV protease inhibitors, irinotecan or imatinib, and along with it, he also takes St. John's wort, there is a risk of therapeutic failure with the affected drug. Why there is therapeutic failure? Because this St. John's wort is inducing the enzyme, and when this enzyme has been induced, means its activity has been increased. Normally it is required, this enzyme is required for metabolism of these drugs such as cyclosporine, tacrolimus and so on and so forth, but it is increasingly metabolized so that the therapeutic failure has been taken place. However, if the affected drug has active metabolites, this may lead to an increased pharmacological effect. The effects of enzyme induction vary considerably between patients and are dependent upon age, genetic factors, concurrent drug treatment and disease state. Now, examples of drug interaction due to enzyme induction, like oral contraceptives when it is taken along with rifampicin. So this rifampicin is inducing the enzyme which is required for the metabolism of oral contraceptives, and the clinical outcome when we give oral contraceptives along with rifampicin is there will be therapeutic failure of contraceptives. Similarly, oral contraceptives when given along with rifabutin, the clinical outcome is additional contraceptive precaution required. And oral contraceptives when given along with modafinil, the clinical outcome is there will be increased estrogen dose required, because all these drugs such as rifampicin, rifabutin and modafinil, all these three drugs are inducing the enzyme which is required for metabolism of oral contraceptives, or you can say there will be increased metabolism and there will be reduced availability of the oral contraceptives at the target site. Similarly, cyclosporine when it is given along with phenytoin or with carbamazepine or along with St. John's wort, the clinical outcome will be there will be decreased cyclosporine levels with possibility of transplant rejection. Last example, corticosteroid when it is given with phenytoin or with rifampicin, the clinical outcome will be increased metabolism with possibility of therapeutic failure. So this is about the enzyme induction, and along with this I have given the examples. Next we'll check out a little bit about the enzyme inhibition. Enzyme inhibition usually results in an increased pharmacological effect of the affected drug, but in cases where the affected drug is a prodrug which requires enzymatic metabolism of active metabolites, a reduced pharmacological effect may result. For example, clopidogrel is metabolized via CYP2C19 to an active metabolite which is responsible for its antiplatelet effect. Proton pump inhibitors such as lansoprazole are inhibitors of CYP2C19 and may lead to reduced effectiveness of clopidogrel when used in combination. Now we'll check out few examples of interaction that may occur due to enzyme inhibition. So anticoagulants when it is given with ciprofloxacin or with clarithromycin, the result will be anticoagulant effect, increased and risk of bleeding. Okay, so why there is increased risk of bleeding? Because the anticoagulant activity has been increased. And why the activity is increased? Because the enzyme required for metabolism of the anticoagulant drug has been inhibited. Okay, so such kind of drug interaction may come out. Next we'll talk about the elimination due to drug interaction due to elimination, or you can say elimination interaction. So we know most of the drugs are excreted in either by bile or via the urine. Now first of all we'll talk about kidneys, and in kidneys we have got nephron and we have got the blood vessels which is supplying the blood to the nephron, and these are like small filters. So blood entering the kidney is delivering the drug is delivering the blood to the glomeruli of the tubules, where molecules which are small enough they can easily get filtered off and will approach to the Bowman's capsule. But the particles of larger molecular size like plasma proteins and blood cells, they will retain. Okay, they will not get filtered off. Okay, they will retain there only. So this is known as glomerular filtration. Followed by glomerular filtration, lots of things happen, such as tubular reabsorption and even tubular secretion also takes place, and during this case drug interaction may happen. So interaction can occur when drug interfere with kidney tubule fluid pH, active transport system or blood flow to the kidney, thereby altering the excretion of other drugs. So elimination interaction may occur because of four factors, such as changes in urinary pH, changes in active renal tubule excretion, changes in renal blood flow, and biliary excretion and enterohepatic shunt. So we'll check out all these four factors one by one. So first, coming to the changes in urinary pH. So as well, drug absorption in the gut, passive reabsorption of drugs also depends on the extent to which the drug exists in a non-ionized lipid soluble form. So this is a nephron, and we know the drug may be present in ionized form or may be present in a non-ionized form. So if a drug is non-ionized means uncharged, which is lipid soluble, it can easily cross the membrane and it can be reabsorbed back into the blood circulation. But when the drug is in charged form, it cannot cross the membrane and it is eliminated out of the body. Now same like we have discussed in case of drug absorption, same things happens over here. The pH plays a major role over here. If the drug is acidic in nature and if we are providing an acidic medium, means if we are making the urine pH acidic, so the drug can be reabsorbed. Similarly, if the drug is basic and we are making the urine basic, then those basic drugs will become non-ionized or lipid soluble and can easily reabsorb. And quite opposite will occur in opposite situation, like by making the urine acidic, basic drugs becomes ionized and gets excreted out, and by making urine alkaline, acidic drug become ionized and gets excreted out. Okay, so if we want a drug to retain in our body and if the drug is acidic in nature, then we should make the urine acidic. But if that acidic drug, we want that acidic drug to get excreted out of our body, then in that case we need to make the urine alkaline in pH. This mechanism of interaction is of very minor clinical significance because most weak acids and bases are inactivated by hepatic metabolism rather than renal excretion. Furthermore, drugs that produce large changes in urine pH are rarely used clinically. Urine alkalinization or acidification has been used as a means of increasing drug elimination in poisoning with salicylates and amphetamines respectively. Okay, so this factor is mainly used in case of drug poisoning. Like if you have taken an overdose of acidic drug, then make the urine basic with the help of amphetamine, and if you have consumed large amount of alkaline drug and there are chances of toxicity, then make the urine acidic with the help of salicylates so that you can treat the drug poisoning. Next important thing is changes in the active renal tubular excretion. So drugs that use the same active transport system in the kidney tubules can compete with one another for excretion. A very simple example is, this is a transporter and this is a penicillin, and the same transporter is used by another drug, that is probenecid. Okay, and we know the half-life of penicillin, the stay time of penicillin in our body is very much less, and we can increase the stay time of penicillin when we are giving penicillin along with probenecid. So it is a kind of interaction. This transporter, this black star what you can see is a transporter, and this is a transporter for both penicillin as well as probenecid. But as compared to penicillin, probenecid have got more affinity for this transporter, and instead of penicillin, probenecid is eliminated out of our body. So by this, the stay time of penicillin can be increased in our body. So with the increasing understanding of drug transporter proteins in the kidneys, it is now known that probenecid inhibits the renal secretion of many other anionic drugs via this organic anionic transporters. Similarly, increased methotrexate toxicity, sometimes life-threatening, has been seen in some patients concurrently treated with salicylates and some other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, that is NSAIDs. The development of toxicity is more likely in patients treated with high doses of methotrexate and those with impaired renal function. But the mechanism of this interaction may be multifactorial, but competitive inhibition of methotrexate's renal tubular secretion is likely to be involved. Okay, so no doubt methotrexate toxicity may occur because of any person who is which have impaired renal function failure, but some kind of interaction occurs when methotrexate is given along with NSAIDs. If patients taking methotrexate are given salicylates or NSAIDs concomitantly, the dose of methotrexate should be closely monitored, because there is a probability that both the drug, that is methotrexates as well as salicylates and or NSAIDs, may be using same kind of transporter. So this is all about the changes in active tubular excretion. Next is changes in the renal blood flow. Blood flow through the kidney is partially controlled by the production of renal vasodilatory prostaglandins. If the synthesis of these prostaglandins is inhibited by drugs such as indomethacin, the renal excretion of lithium is reduced with a subsequent rise in plasma levels. The mechanism underlying this interaction is not entirely clear, as plasma lithium levels are unaffected by other potent prostaglandin synthesis inhibitors, for example aspirin. If an NSAID is prescribed for a patient taking lithium, the plasma levels should be closely monitored. Now coming to our last part, that is biliary excretion and the enterohepatic shunt. Now suppose this is our liver, this is our gastrointestinal tract, and this is the connector, that is it is the a biliary system. Okay, enterohepatic shunt, and we know most of the drug metabolism takes place in the liver, either by phase 1 reaction or by phase 2 reaction. In phase 2 reaction, what will happen? There will be an endogenous substance that will conjugate with that drug, so that this drug will become water soluble and it can be eliminated out via the biliary system, means via the fecal matter. But what happened? Some of the conjugates are metabolized by to the parent compound by the gut flora and are then reabsorbed. Okay, these are reabsorbed because of the gut flora will produce some kind of reaction. This recycling process prolongs the stay of the drug within the body. This is known as enterohepatic cycling. But if we are giving any drug that is inhibiting the gut flora, like any kind of antibiotics is if given, it will inhibit the gut flora, and when gut flora are diminished by the presence of an antibacterial, the drug is not recycled and is lost more quickly. Okay, so this is about the biliary excretion and the enterohepatic shunt system. No doubt we have no doubt we want this conjugation reaction to get, so that we should get rid of the drug should get eliminated out, but still the bacterial the flora, the enzymes which are present in the intestine, the enzymes that reside in the intestine, they may increase the statum of the drug. But if we are inhibiting these enzymes, means with the help of certain antibacterial drugs, if these enzymes are being inhibited, means the statum of this drug is also inhibited, means the entire hepatic cycling is also getting inhibited. So this is about the biliary excretion and the interhepatic shunt. This mechanism has been postulated as the basis of an interaction between the broad spectrum antibiotics and the oral contraceptives. Antibiotics may reduce the enterohepatic cycling of ethinyl estradiol conjugates, leading to reduced circulating estrogen levels with the potential for therapeutic failure. There is considerable debate about the nature of this interaction, as the evidence from pharmacokinetic studies is not convincing. However, due to potential adverse consequences of pill failure, most authorities recommend a conservative approach, including the use of additional contraceptive precautions to cover the short-term use of the broad-spectrum antibiotics. So with this, I have completed the topic, that is pharmacokinetic drug interaction. I hope you all found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.